Compensation pension. Compensation pension is granted to a government servant who is discharged due to abolition of his permanent post or due to change in the nature of duties of that post. However, he has option to accept the another post having the same conditions as his old post, or B may be transferred to another establishment even on a lower post, with continuing to count his previous previous service for pension. If he does not accept another post or transfer to another establishment, may be on a lower post, then he may be discharged by giving him compensation pension or gratuity for which he is entitled for the service rendered by him. However, giving him posting in another establishment is at the discretion of the competent authority, and if the competent authority deems that B cannot be provided for another post, the reasons thereof should be recorded. Invalid pension rule 68. An invalid pension shall be granted to a government servant who is permitted to retire from government service before reaching the age superannuation or production of a medical certificate incapacitating him for a government servant. Compensation pension rule 100 to 102. A government servant who is removed or required to retire from government service for misconduct or inefficiency or insolvency, he shall be granted compassionate pension. If such a government servant is eligible for a superannuation pension or a retiring pension, he will be granted the same. But if he is not eligible for superannuation or retiring pension, then he shall be granted no pension other than a compassionate pension. The amount of compassionate pension is fixed by the government, but in any case, it should not be exceed 2/3 of the invalid pension which would have been admissible to him had he retired on a medical certificate. However, it should not be below the minimum pension as fixed by the government. At present, the minimum compassionate pension is ₹60. Vote on account. It is an approval to the part of the budget. It is an advance grant against the budget permitted by the Parliament on Assembly for spending annually. The Finance Ministry may arrange to obtain vote on account to cover expenditure for one another for some longer period as may be necessity pending the passing or budget. Vote on account is not to be utilized for expenditure on new service. Advance from contingent fund. If pre-appropriation is not possible, then the advance from contingent fund is made for expenditure excess of the budget. Exhibition of losses in government account. It provides following points: receipts, building, land, stores or equipments, cash in hand, irregular or unusual payments, inevitable losses. On probation, when a government servant is continuing in a permanent post but his suitability is tested for some specific period, then he is said to be an probationer. Controlling officers' duties before countersigning TABs. Following are the main points to be seen in the audit of travelling allowance bill: that the journey was actually performed, that the journey was necessary and authorized by general or special orders, that it was performed as expeditiously as possible. No bill has been submitted for this purpose before the amount claimed or drawn is correct with reference to the rates and general conditions. An advance from contingency fund. No new expenditure can be incurred without the approval of legislature, but it is impracticable to summon the legislature from time to time to otherwise such expenditure from the consolidated fund. Therefore, the Constitution provides for the establishment of the contingency fund from which such unforeseen expenditure can be made pending approval of the legislature for the items. Accordingly, an expenditure is incurring against such advance against the contingency fund. The payments made out of this fund are substantially recouped to the fund by making the necessary supplementary demands covering this expenditure and the same are simultaneously sanctioned by the legislature out of the consolidated fund. If reappropriation is not possible, then advance from contingency fund is made for expenditure in excess of the budgets. From such advance, an application is to be made to the finance department giving brief particulars of new expenses required to be incurred, giving reasons for why it postponed. If post-permanent is not possible, the finance department orders for sanctioning of an advance from the contingency fund. It is to be recouped subsequently. Cost plus contract rule 12 of general finance rule. A cost plus contract means a contract where the price payable for supplier or services under the contract is determined on the basis of actual cost of productions plus profit, either at a fixed rate per unit or at fixed percentage on the actual cost of production of the supplies or services. Plus and minus memorandum. Rule 12 126 of BFR. Plus and minus a memorandum is a record of loans and advances maintained by the treasury officer. Each transaction to recorded separately. Every government servant should see that the debits and credits made to his account is correct and correspond to those that are recorded in his own registry and returns. Supplementary grant expenditure on new service. General financial rule. No expenditure shall be incurred during a financial year on a new service not contemplated in the annual budget for those years unless obtaining a supplementary grant or appropriation or an advance from the contingency fund during that year. Late tender. Late tenders means the tenders issued after the specified time of opening. They should not be considered at all. However, they may be accepted under exceptional circumstances in consultation with the head of department or the finance department, where such a decision is in the interest of the encouraging in diagnosis, regional or country-wide productions, or where it is necessary in the absence of adequate competition. Single tender issued late may also be considered if there are no other offers issued in the provided the price is reasonable. Delayed tenders. Delayed tenders are those tenders which are issued before the time of opening, after the due date and time of receipt of tenders. They should not be considered at all. However, under exceptional circumstances, under the approval of the head of the department, they may be considered if the procurement officers feels that the response through other tenders which are issued in time is not adequate or competitive, and if it is believed that the delayed tender is bona fide in the sense that no undue advantage would come to the tenders through such consideration. Subsistence allowance. Subsistence allowance means a monthly grant made to a government servant who is not in receipt or pay or leave salary. Rule 68. Subsistence allowance is the payment made to a government servant who is under suspension. This is equal to half pay leave salary for the first year of suspension. It can suitably be increased. Following recoveries are made from the subsistence allowance. Rule 69A. Compulsory deductions. Following deductions should be made as a compulsory deductions: recovery towards income tax and professional tax, license fee and allied charges, that is government quarters rent, electricity and water charges, furniture, etc. Repayment of government loans and advances, but at such rates as the head of the department deems fit. Government house building or conveyance loan. The optional deductions. Following deductions shall be made unless consent to the writing by the government servant. Premium due to on postal life insurance policies, amount of house building or any other loan due to cooperative society, refund installment of GPF advance. Other deductions will not be made even with the consent of a government servant. Following deductions are not to be made from the subsistence allowance even though the government servant desires. GPF subscriptions, amount due on court attachment, recovery of loss cost to government for which government servant is held responsible. When a government servant is convicted by a competent court and sanctioned to imprisonment, he shall be entitled to the nominal amount of rupees 1 p.m. as one only as subsistence allowance with effect the date of convictions, and there shall continue to draw the same bill is acquitted or releases, setting him free from the charge. But if he is acquitted in the meantime by the appellant court, then he shall be entitled to draw substantial allowance. When the suspension is unjustified, then the period of suspension is counted as a service rendered on duty. It is treated as a duty service. Revenue expenditure means the benefits received immediately, example pay and allowances of store. Revenue expenditure consists of expenditure incurred or replacement, repairs, renewals and depreciations of fixed assets, and also the current expenditure for carrying on the business. Pay and allowances of the staff employed for earning revenue, the incidental expenses such as rent, insurance. Capital expenditure means the benefits issued much later, that example project whole of the initiate of expenditure in connection with the formation of a scheme prior to its being opened for regular working must be known as capital expenditure. What is joining time? Joining time means time allowed to a government servant to join a new post or travel to or from a state to which is posted. When admissible, rule number 10, join time may be granted to a government servant to enable him to join a new post either at the same or a new station without availing himself at any leave or on relinquishing charge of his old post. To join a new post in the new station or return from leave of not more than 180 days duration, leave other than that specified in subclass when he has not had sufficient notice of his appointment to the new post. Charge of appointment at the same station, rule 12. No joining time is admissible when the change of appointment does not involve an actual change of office, when there is internal change of table. Not more than 1 day joining time is allowed when for the appointment to a post in new office does not involve a change of residence from one station to another. In other words, when there is actual charge of office but in the same station. A holiday or Sunday counts as a day for the purpose of this rule. The joining time of a government servant in case involving a transfer from one station to another is subject to a maximum of 30 days service. 7 days including Sunday and holidays are allowed to preparation and an additional to cover the actual journey calculated as follows. 1 day for journey on transfer to a place within the same district, that is a distance having a common border at any point. 2 days for joining on transfer to a place other than those mentioned in clause A above. When a government servant is required to join a new post without availing of the full joining time, the joining time is admissible subject to the maximum of 10 days shall be credited to his earned leave account. As per Rule 16, if a government servant has appointment to a new post which in transit from one post to another post, his joining time begins on the day following that on which he received the order, but a second period, 7 days for preparation, will not be allowed. Rule 30 MCSR 81. Pay during joining time. Government servant on joining time shall be regarded as on duty and shall be entitled to be paid as under where joining time is granted as under Rule 1 of Rule 10, the pay which he would have drawn if he had continued in the old post where the joining time is granted under sub Rule 2 of Rule 10, pay equal to the leave salary which the government servant would have drawn had he been on leave, while on leave or not due, leave not due is credited to half pay leave account which the government servant should subsequently authority competent to grant this leave may obtain or undertaking from the government servant that in the event of his resigning or retiring voluntarily without returning to daily duty, he shall refund the leave salary paid to him. If he returns to duty and subsequently retires from service before earning of such leave, he shall be liable to refund leave salary to the extent of leave not earned. During the period under suspension rule 72 as per 72 of rule MCSR, when a government servant who has been suspended is reinstated, the authority competent to order reinstatement shall consider and to make a specific order regarding the pay and allowances to be paid to the government servant for the period of suspension. If the competent authority to order reinstatement is of the opinion that suspension was wholly unjustified, then the government servant shall also be paid the full pay and allowances to which he would have been entitled had he not been suspended, and the period of suspension may also be treated as the period spent on duty for all purposes. And the utilization of departmental receipts toward departmental expenditure is generally prohibited. Not any 10 purposes for which this rule has been relaxed in certain departments, state or central. The utilization of departmental receipts toward departmental expenditure is very prohibited. Rule 8(1) of MTR 1968, but this rule is relaxed in the following purposes in certain departments. Rule 8(2) of MTR 1968, in the case of money received on account of the service of summons, diet, money of witness and similar purposes for in civil, revenue and criminal cases. Second, in cases of deposit received at a civil court and are utilized by the court to meet claims for the refund of such deposits. The fees received by government servants from notaries public may utilize to give legal expenses incurred by them in the discharge of their duties. In a public works department, the current works expenditure or for disbursements of pay and allowances like traveling allowance, but with the authorization of AG with a view to prevent abnormal delay in payment. The cash found with the persons as prisoner at the time of their admission to jail, the jail superintendent may use the same for repayment to other premises on their release. For a department to meet immediate expenditure, the amount recovered under the Cattle Trespass Act from the owners of the cattle or from the sale proceeds, impounded cattle may be used for feeding and watering charges to the cattle in imprisonment. The Commissioner of Workmen compensation may use the money received by him, the money received by the medical officer of the government hospital or dispenses in the state from the patients towards fees or advances or deposits can be utilized by such medical officer for the purpose of refund of fees or deposits to the other patients.